Hello everyone, Narcissist Free almost here, and today I'm starting a 6-part series about what's called the cavum septum pellucidum and what that has to do with pathological narcissism or psychopathy in general. It seems information about this little gem is somewhat known throughout the radiological, neurological, and neuropsychiatric fields, but hasn't made it into the mainstream yet. Or maybe I'm just late to the party, but in any case, from what I've been researching, it seems like one of the next to last pieces of the psychopathy puzzle. That said, it's always been my contention that pathological narcissism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that manifests as personality disorders, among other disorders and syndromes. Furthermore, most of my research into narcissism has been theoretical, mainly object relations theory and learning from giants like Otto Kernberg, but I've also been interested in the neurological aspects of the psychopathic brain. Having been a victim of narcissism my entire life, and yes, I was born into this madness, unfortunately, and this would also include my last farmhouse torture ride with a malignant narcissist. So I'm a bit obsessed with getting to the bottom of this thing and being done with it once and for all. Because when you've experienced a person so high on the spectrum, one who compulsively lies just for the sake of lying, or has psychotic mini-episodes, leaving you to wonder if they actually are truly psychotic, even schizophrenic, you know that this is something more than a person choosing to be evil because of a case of childhood abuse and neglect. By the way, of all the narcissists I've known, the only one who ever got used and abused in all manners of abuse was me, by them, and then blamed for the abuse they inflicted on me. Next, if you've been a regular listener to my vlog, you'll often hear me referring to 3 very specific and important psychological terms referring to infant development. The first one is Freud's reference to fixation due to trauma, where fixation refers to a person's persistent focus on an earlier stage of psychosexual development. In other words, an arrest in development. The second theory is Melanie Klein's depressive position, which is the stage of infant development that reaches its peak at about 6 months old and carries onward throughout our lifetimes, where in the depressive position, as you may recall, the infant begins to perceive the good object and bad object as a single whole and feels guilt for having attacked the good object during the preceding paranoid schizoid position, and that begins at birth and lasts only to about 3 to 4 months. In this phase of primary psychological organization, the infant fears that they will lose or destroy the good object and attempts to make reparation for earlier hostility. It is said that the lack of capacity for this position is tied to severe pathology, and you may notice this lack of capacity as lack of the ability to attach as well. The third theory I talk about very often are reparation cycles, which are the strategy the infant settles on when faced with conflict. There are 2 solutions in the process of integration. The positive, healthy choice for growth is benign reparation, which consists of thoughts, activities, and sublimation, where the infant is noticing their ability to recognize their destructive impulses towards those they love and make reparation for the damage they may have caused them. This is said to be an essential part of mental health. Additionally, the key condition for this to take place is the recognition of one's separateness from one's parents, which makes possible the reparative attempt to restore their inner representations, however damaged they may be felt to be. Then there is the manic reparation cycle, which consists of control, contempt, and triumph, where manic defenses are designed to protect the ego from despair. It is a means of feeling and being omnipotent and very much belongs to the paranoid schizoid position. So you can see how primitive these defenses are. Again, a healthy infant will begin to organize and outgrow this position by the age of 6 months old and onward throughout their lifetime. Using the manic defenses explains the narcissist's inability to deal with loss, and this leads to symptoms like depression and behaviors like rage. This is a sign of regression into an existence of black and white thinking in which there are projections made towards the outside world to ward off unbearable feelings. The narcissist experiences like lack of control over someone as an attack on psychic reality and uses manic defenses in an effort to control external objects. Pathological narcissists do not have the ability to mature past this primitive cycle and recognize separateness, as well as integrate good and bad part objects to achieve whole object relations. If one were to use psychoanalytic lingo, you could say that the narcissist developed a fixation in very early infancy, resulting in the inability to work through the depressive position. The fixation point is said to be the result of some sort of trauma, namely love betrayed, but is that really the case? I suggest that it is not, and this early symptomology is the reason the cavum septum pellucidum, which is responsible for fetal brain development, causes a wide range of both mental and physical disorders. When it is enlarged, doesn't close properly, and is persistent. I would further argue that given the time period when these brilliant theories were presented, there was only one way of looking at infant development, and that was through the lens of nurturing by the primary love object, usually mother. Because a child failed to thrive or develop in a healthy way, it must have been the mother who is responsible, right? And that makes sense for the time and what technologies and knowledge that were available to people, but things are vastly different now, especially with the use of radiology and functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. Lastly, the idea that narcissism is genetically heritable is finally becoming an accepted view, especially because now we have brain scans of both psychopaths and pathological narcissists, which are proving, by the way, that they do indeed have physically different brains. Going back a few years, I would be shut down immediately, then derided at the very mention that narcissism was a neurodevelopmental disorder, but things are beginning to change thanks to technology. Some would definitely argue that abuse is what changes the brain, and yes, I do believe that can be true as well. But what if I show you the evidence that in the earliest fetal development, the cavum septum pellucidum may be the cause of a myriad of psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, antisocial behavior, mood disorders, and so on. I've often said that personality disorders are heritable and can either be made worse or better in the family environment. Babies are not blank slates as much as people like to believe. Babies are the genetic byproduct of their parents as evidenced by who they resemble, their hair and eye color, intelligence, temperament, and so on. We are all born to 3 equally important factors involved in our development, according to James F. Masterson, and those are nature, nurture, and fate. No one, he says, escapes childhood unscathed, and I definitely concur. But the question that has always bothered me is, why do most of us who are actually abused by these narcissists don't turn into narcissists ourselves? It's becoming obvious, just like recognizing Freudian psychology had to start evolving because we're not living in the Victoria era anymore. And so does including the evolving science-based evidence into our views on mental disorders. Genetic inheritance seems to have a little bit more weight these days when it comes to psychiatric disorders. It gets a little more credit than it used to, as it should. In the next parts, I present just a smidgen of current research regarding the CSP and its critical function in the development of the human brain, where you will learn what the cavum septum pellucidum is, what it does, and what an enlarged or persistent CSP means for children and adults. Thank you for listening, and see you in part 2.